The biggest message that we want to leave you with tonight: you're not on your own. You are part of a movement of thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And no change would ever have happened if people hadn't stood up like you're standing up now. This is our moment to be giants, and we will do that together. And we will keep going, and we will win. It is through solidarity that we will win this. All of you coming together. You are the union and you are the company. And our biggest message to the company right now: you see your workforce as the problem. They're not the problem, they're the solution. And we will win because we will stick together. Thank you. Welcome everyone. We're here tonight, as the video said, because this is our moment to be giants. The GMB Union was founded in 1889 by gas workers. And at that time, they went out on strike for very similar reasons to why you're all out on strike now, which is for the work-life balance. They were fighting for the 8-hour day, and our fight is very similar to their fight. We're on the eve of something huge within GMB and within our relationship with British Gas. And just as our members won back in 1889, we know that you are going to win too, because your cause is right and your cause is just. And all the work that you have done is paying off. And it paid off big time today, the Select Committee. And we'll go over that in more details later. But for now, I want to welcome some of our speakers that we're going to have. We've got a really, really exciting lineup. We've got Sadiq Khan, we've got Owen Jones, we've got the judge of the Court of Public Opinion, Judge Rinder, who's been a huge supporter for ours. And I'm going to go now to a video from the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. And this is important because there is a consequence for companies that treat members and treat workers the way you've been treated. So we'll cut to the video for Sadiq, who's got a message of solidarity for all of you.
Friends, I'm grateful for this opportunity to show my support to British Gas workers and all of you fighting against the disgraceful practice of fire and rehire. I congratulate the GMB on their brilliant Stop the British Gas Fire campaign, which is showing the very best of trade unionism. As Mayor, I've written to the Chief Executive of Centrica to urge British Gas to do the right thing and to get back around the negotiating table. It shouldn't be too much to ask that companies treat their employees with dignity and respect. At City Hall, we only want to do business with good employers. And right now, British Gas wouldn't make the cut because their workers deserve far better.
Well, that's an incredibly strong message from Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London. And we've had huge support from many members of the Labour Party, but we've had support from across the political divide. I think the greatest achievement that Chris O'Shea's had so far is that he's managed to provoke the largest gas strike since the 1970s. But he's also managed, at a time of unrivaled political tension, to unite politicians from all across the different political spectrum. And that is because they all condemn what is happening to you now. So we're going to show you a little video to demonstrate that you've managed to unite everybody. So we'll cut to that now.
Keep strong, stay strong. I think the country's with you. This does define the recovery. Are we going for a cutthroat recovery, a race to the bottom recovery, or are we in the business of levelling up and not levelling down?
I'm calling on senior leaders in British Gas to get back to the negotiations, resolve the situation, and let your loyal workforce get back to their work.
I support the workers in this regard. I think they are being treated appallingly, and I would call on British Gas to get round the table with them and come to a fair outcome as quickly as possible.
Our message is clear. To the employer, come back round the table, sit down with the workforce, resolve this issue in a way that protects this business.
We regard fire and rehire as unacceptable, and we will continue to make that point.
Employers need to treat employees fairly, and in the spirit of partnership, I do hope, therefore, that Centrica will reach a negotiated outcome.
This practice is unacceptable. And my honourable friend, the Minister for Labour Markets, has condemned this practice in the strongest terms.
There's now an all-party consensus that Scottish Gas has got it all wrong. I urge them to go back to the negotiating table with the unions and the workforce and to ensure we have a peaceful settlement of this dispute.
At a time when the company's been making the profits that the union has exposed and the pay at the highest levels of the organisation, to think that this is the right response, I'm afraid, does tarnish the brand. It's why we've got to make sure that you win.
That just shows that whether it's in Scotland, whether it's in Wales, whether it's in England, politicians across the board are backing and supporting you. And that's because when we have different disputes in the trade union movement, sometimes people say, you know, there's both sides to a story, but everyone unites together to say that the use of fire and rehire as a negotiation tactic, as an unnecessary negotiation tactic, is completely wrong. And that was exposed today at great length in the Select Committee, which I know many of our members in British Gas were tuning in to see. So I'm going to go to Wales now, because as we said with Sadiq in London, the administration in Wales have a huge contract with British Gas, and they're not happy one bit with how they see our members being represented and treated by the company.
Unfortunate that we're having to have this session in public evidence before the committee, and I sincerely hope, as do colleagues on a cross-party basis on this committee, that you're able to resolve this both for your workers, for the success of the business in the future, and indeed for your customers, who I know are also wanting you to resolve this. The key issue, I think, for us to take away is this issue of interpretation of the legislation. As it stands, I'm not entirely convinced by the argument that you had to issue the fire and rehire so early because of the law, because if that was the case, every other business would be doing it at the moment, going through these redundancy processes. So my sense at the end of this hearing is that was probably your decision, Mr. O'Shea, and I think you might want to reflect on that, because I think from my perspective, it was probably the wrong way of doing it. But we will take up your offer of seeing the legal advice, and we will talk in private session with your lawyers and also with the trade union as we look to the employment rights bill that's going to be coming to the House in due course to see whether we need to ban fire and rehire as a legal right in legislation.
So you'll have all tuned in, many of you, to watch the Select Committee. That was the chair of the Select Committee saying that he doesn't buy what Chris O'Shea was saying, that it was necessary to do that. Interesting that Chris O'Shea's line, and he's, you know, a CEO of a huge company, was that a big boy made him do it, and it was the solicitors that told him to instigate the Section 188. Well, we're certainly looking forward to seeing that piece of legal advice as well, and I certainly hope that Chris O'Shea was telling the truth about that. He wouldn't want to be up against the Select Committee a second time. To give you more information on that, we're going to bring in Justin Bowden, and I think that Justin did great credit to the GMB and to all of you today in front of the Select Committee, and the juxtaposition of him versus Chris O'Shea and how they appeared and how he spoke, I think speaks volumes about the integrity that you have all shown, and by keeping your heads high throughout this whole process. Justin. I think we're having a few technical issues. We're just using a new platform at the moment. So I'm going to introduce instead at the moment Steve Rotheram, who is the Mayor of Liverpool City area. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. Can you give us a bit of your perspective as a local government leader on this dispute and how it's impacting the Labour movement as well, and how this has been seen in a wider context?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for the invite. I was actually supposed to be on a call last week, and my son got gallstones, so I think you'll excuse me missing out on that one. But the fact that we can't come together shouldn't disguise the reality that we are still able to show this fantastic virtual show of strength. And you've heard from people like Sadiq and others about what we believe we can do when we do all come together. And to those British Gas workers who are listening in, I want to offer all of you our complete solidarity in the Liverpool City region. You know, if you have a look at what's happened over the last 11 months or so, the pandemic has brought out the best in people. So, you know, look at the long overdue recognition for key workers and the outpouring of support that we've seen for our NHS. But many British gas engineers have also gone above and beyond to support our communities during this pandemic, and that should actually be recognised. So I want to thank you all for your fantastic efforts. But conversely, we've also seen the worst in people, haven't we? You know, people like O'Shea and Centrica bosses who are using these uncertain times to drive or to try to drive down pay and conditions. So let me be clear, just in case he ever does listen to what this broadcast is, this is not a time for that. This is a time when we should be actually rewarding, not penalising workers for keeping us going over this last period. And any fire and rehire attempts are not only deplorable, they are morally and ethically bankrupt practices that are totally unacceptable and which we will resist at every turn. You know, we're trying to do things differently in our area. And a fortnight today, for instance, I'll be launching my Fair Employment Charter in the Liverpool City region alongside Francis O'Grady. And that's designed to push back against these sorts of unscrupulous employment practices. They just do not have a place in a modern Britain. And I know that many comrades present will have played a part in shaping that charter. And I hope it'll go some way to ensure that organisations do things like pay the real living wage, eradicate the use of 0 hours contracts, recognise and work with trade unions, and provide apprenticeships and opportunities for people from underrepresented groups. Because we have to stand up and unite against shameful and cowardly attacks on workers' rights wherever we see them. And we send a very clear message today, don't we, to Centrica and all unscrupulous employers that there's no place for fire and rehire. So good luck in your ongoing fight. You've got my and the Liverpool City region's full support.
Thank you so much for that support. It means so much to our members. And, you know, it's been said many times that Chris O'Shea and the Centrica senior leadership team are trying to future-proof the business. The best thing they could do to future-proof the business is to treat their employees right, because people will remember the way they treated all of the workforce in British Gas, and that will have long-term consequences for the company. You can tell everything about someone by how they treat people who they work with. And speaking of people who we work with, I am absolutely delighted to introduce a friend of mine who used to work for GMB. She's on the select committee that grilled Chris O'Shea today, and she's here to tell us more about that process. Welcome, Charlotte. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad. So, Charlotte, you're on the select committee, oh,
I don't know where Hazel's gone there. Am I back? Okay. Yeah, so hi everyone, and thank you so much for having me along tonight. It's a real privilege. I was lucky enough to go down to the picket line at Stockport last week, and I think speaking to the people who were being affected there, the amount of emails and direct messages that I've had from not only engineers themselves, but also their families about the intolerable pressure that they're under at the moment was all things that I really tried to take into today's meeting with the Bay Select Committee. And I did see someone in the chat saying that Justin must have used up all his best Wi-Fi going into the Select Committee, which is why he was having technical difficulties on this call. And I think it's exactly right, because he was a real credit to GMB and to you guys in that meeting. I can't say the same, unfortunately, for Chris O'Shea, who I found personally to be very arrogant in his responses, who was, I think, trying to talk so long that we couldn't get as many questions as we wanted to put to him. And a lot of what he said, fundamentally, I just felt was nonsense. So he, as Hazel said, was saying that, you know, his hands were tied, that legally their legal advice was that they had to issue the Section 188 notices right at the start of the negotiations. When as someone who's been, a trade union officer and has been involved in these kinds of negotiations for a decade before coming into Parliament, if that was the case in every single redundancy consultation, that would happen. And it doesn't, because it isn't inevitable. It isn't something they have to do. It's something they chose to do as a negotiating tactic. And to use the threat of hire and refire as a negotiating tactic is disgusting at the best of times. But during a global pandemic, when people are worried that they may not be able to get a job somewhere else, it's absolutely abhorrent. And I think the fact that across the House, people that I would cross the street to disagree with are coming out and they're saying that they support you guys. I think probably one of the most surreal moments of recent weeks was seeing Gemma Collins from The Only Way is Essex coming out and supporting you guys. I mean, the amount of support that you've got behind you is incredible. The whole country is behind you. And I think that's because everyone can see this for what it is. And that's, if British Gas get away with it, then everyone else is going to try to do it as well. So we're doing all that we can to support you guys in Parliament, taking them before the Select Committee and getting them to answer those questions. I think one of the ones today that I found particularly striking in his answers was Chris O'Shea talking about the number of apprentices that the company is taking on. But I can't understand why anyone would want to start their career at British Gas, seeing what they're doing to people with 10, 20, 30 years service at the moment. And I think they need to get real about that. So I'm hopeful that, you guys holding strong, having the support of GMB behind you, having the support of Parliament behind you, and just, that you're going to get the result, because we're all rooting for you. So solidarity, and thank you for everything you're doing in the fight, not just for yourselves, but as I said, for every other worker in the country whose employer is looking to this dispute to decide whether or not it's a precedent that they're going to follow.
Charlotte, and I know that your support to all of our members, and especially our members out in the picket line, means a huge amount. Well, we've seen so far that the company have been very successful in uniting political opinion. They've also been very successful in uniting public opinion. And on that front, I'm very pleased and excited to introduce the judge of the Court of Public Opinion, which is the new title we've given him, Judge Rinder. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell us, has this been a net win in the Court of Public Opinion for British Gas?
I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I want to echo, it's not just a privilege to be here, it's something more. This is a moment, a serious one, in cultural history. And the privilege that I have in standing shoulder to shoulder alongside people of every political complexion and from every community in solidarity with the courage, because that's what it takes, the courage of all of your members and everybody that's here tonight. Courage to go on strike despite knowing the personal economic risk at a moment of the beginnings of economic catastrophe. And it isn't just that you've galvanized public opinion, you've done something infinitely more important and profound. Just very quickly, I should tell you, I became aware of your fight. It feels wrong putting it in that way. A fight very often has two sides of an argument. You can see it through different moral prisms. This isn't a fight. This is a clear struggle between right and wrong, between good and bad, between what's lawful and what is or should be unlawful. That's not a fight. The reason I became aware of it is because one of my best friends growing up is married to one of your colleagues. And at the center of his life is his family and his wife. That's his mission, to be a good dad, and above all else, to be a good husband. His job is part of that, but it informs just part of the complexion of who he is. He wants to do it as well as he can. It's undoubtedly underpaid. He's undoubtedly overworked. But what he represents, as each and every one of you do, are the millions of all of us, my dad, my granddad, who don't get massive dividends, who aren't plugged in, as we see across the world now, to the increasingly short supply of the 1%, just people who want to do an honest day's work for an honest day's pay. And the only way that that can be achieved, the only way that can be achieved is through what your company is trying to do to you, then there is something rotten at the very heart of who we are as a nation. And finally, I want to say this, because I also tuned in part to the Select Committee. As a leader of a company, you have legal advice. You can choose whether to follow it or not. Those of you that worked for British Gas had to be entitled to rely on the contractual promises that were made to you. You wore the threads of the words in that contract as a tapestry to cloak you in safety that you had a job, that you were entitled to the promise of the rule of law of our country. That rule of law has been denied to you. And without the rule of law, our democracy is meaningless. This isn't just an issue, frankly, about one company and what it is seeking to do to each and every one of you. It strikes at the very core of who we are as a society. It starts with each and every one of you, and they'll come for you first. And we have to think now about who they'll go to next if each and every one of us standing alongside you fail in the struggle. That's why we can't afford to fail. You had contracts. This is more than rights. This is about what the words of those contracts should mean, did mean, and that you, as a matter of fundamental law, living in a Western liberal democracy, are entitled to have relied on those words. This company is failing you. Your bravery and your courage, who you are and what you represent, speaks to who we are and who we should and can be at our best. So I want to thank each and every one of you for your bravery and for having me stand alongside you. And I wish you all the very best of luck. I promise you, everybody of any decency is standing shoulder to shoulder with you.
Rinder, thank you so much. That really means so much to our members. You know, a lot of our members, as you know from your friend, work in isolation, and it can be really lonely at the best times. So hearing that from you is really, really inspiring, and I couldn't agree more with what you said. You know, the human stories that have come out from our workforce are just so powerful. And we've tried our best as a union, and our members have, and they are the union ultimately, in acting in a way with integrity. And as I said earlier, I think that our National Secretary, Justin, showed a huge amount of integrity at the Select Committee today, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be able to bring him in now to talk to our members and to those watching about what happened this morning. Justin.
Good evening, colleagues. Can you just stick your thumbs up, and hopefully you can hear me, Hazel. There'll be about a 5-second delay. For those of you that are regular viewers here, you'll be very surprised to hear I'm involved in some sort of technological problem. I'm going to rattle through on that basis. A couple of things, first of all, by way of observation. A huge thanks to Judge Rinder. I found that incredibly powerful, and it is always nice when somebody outside of the kind of trade union and dispute bubble that we end up getting ourselves very involved in a struggle like this comes on and just provides such an eloquent summary of where things are. So thanks to him for that. I think probably there were the biggest viewing figures that Bayes Select Committees maybe ever had today. I know from some of the texts and WhatsApps and emails I've had that there were thousands of you tuned in to see what happened. So I think that's a good thing, really, just from a point of view of democracy. And then the final thing to say is I've decided to keep my tie on just for a special treat. You'll not see me in them normally, other than at weddings and funerals. So just to go through, Hazel, if I can please say a big thank you to Charlotte Nichols, came on earlier. I just saw a glimpse of that before I crashed out for the third time. A huge thank you, please, to Charlotte for what you did today for our members. But if I can extend thanks also through you to all of your colleagues from all political parties on the Select Committee today, who I believe did a very dignified and thorough job with subjecting both of us to the sorts of questions that I think you deserve to see happen in an open democracy. So thanks very much to Charlotte, and thanks to the committee. The evidence, colleagues, that GMB gave to the Bayes Select Committee was important for three quick reasons. Firstly, as anyone who saw it will know, it was an opportunity for MPs of all parties to get first-hand information about your dispute, and then to be able to ask questions of myself and of Mr. O'Shea. And finally, a very, very large public interest issue, and what is happening to you is the highest profile example of how this country's employment laws need to be changed, and they need to be changed very soon. Secondly, it provided, I think, a useful publicity opportunity about what's happening at British Gas, and for Parliament to hear from the two main protagonists in the war of words. And colleagues, there isn't going to be some sort of magic wand that gets waved just because Mr. O'Shea and I were called before a parliamentary select committee of MPs, but it is an important process. It's an important part of bringing in front of the wider population, the media and everybody else, what has been happening to you and what it is that needs to be done in terms of change. And for those people who make the laws ultimately, to have people in front who hold power, myself included, and then to hold them to account is absolutely vital in terms of what we say and what we do. And then just finally, that leads me really to my last point, which is the select committee has a specific interest in what's going on in workplaces up and down the country during COVID. And today they shone a bright light right into the eyes of fire and rehire and into its usage. And in the case of British Gas, its usage as a preemptive weapon to try to force through change. And I think today hopefully served to have helped the wider world understand what's happened to you, to get a better understanding about what fire and rehire means to ordinary working people that are just trying to do a decent job out there. In the case of yourselves, for customers who pay your wages, but ultimately generate the wealth through you of the business that you work for. And also because I think most ordinary citizens would consider fire and rehire to be a disproportionate abuse of power, something that's very un-British and very unbecoming of a company like British Gas. So change, colleagues, is the last thing I want to say, should be achieved by negotiation and consent, never by force. And let's hope that today has helped pave the way for that to happen over the coming days. Thanks very much, Hazel, and back to you.
You did us all proud today. And I think that's one thing that we can all stand with. In GMB, we always say that we're GMB and proud. And today, you made all of us proud of you. I want to go to another member of ours who's made us proud, watching the incredible stories that have come through from the workforce and from our membership. So I'm going to introduce Kelly, who is a member of ours in service and repair. Kelly, can you tell us a little bit about why you're on strike and what this really means to you and what it feels like on the ground as a striking worker and a striking mum?
Yeah. To be honest, I can't believe we're here. I can't believe after 23 years with this company that I have now taken part in 12 days of strike, and there are more continuing, and there doesn't seem to be any let up. You know, this is through no fault of our own. We're not even asking for anything. We're not asking for more money. We're not asking for more holiday. We're not asking to work less. All we're asking is to simply have a fair work-life balance. And, you know, as I say, I can't believe we're in this position. I guess what hurts the most is the loyalty we've shown this company. I don't know a single engineer with less than 10 years service. You know, that kind of loyalty is unheard of in any trade. People can't understand it, but we love our jobs. We love working for this company and we want to see it successful. And it just appears that the senior leadership team are determined to ruin it. You know, they're putting our customers at risk, and they're just hell-bent on disregarding everything that we stand for. It's awful.
Yeah. I mean, it's shocking the way that people have been treated. And, you know, when I was on the picket line the first day, one of our reps in Scotland, she said to me, you know, the thing is, these company directors, they come and they go, but it's the workforce that remain. And that really stuck with me because it's the workforce and the customers. That is what British Gas is. Yeah. And, you know, in terms of...
Sorry, they have no idea. They're so far removed from what we do. They have absolutely no idea what it's like to be on the ground. We don't just provide a heating service for our customers, you know, especially at this time. We provide solace, we provide counsel, we provide company for our customers who might be elderly, lonely, bereaved. Especially this year, we could be the only person who's sat over their thresholds for months. You know, we're more than just providing a service. You can't just replace that You can't just get, we're not easily replaceable. And they are trying to make us feel like we're worthless and that we're not valued. It's not a run-of-the-mill 9-to-5 job where you can clock off when your shift is over. It's if you're on a job at the end of your shift, you finish that job, whether it takes you 10 minutes or it takes you 2 hours. We all go above and beyond. We all give the flexibility that we need. And I'm not speaking just for myself, but it does put a strain on people's family lives. For me personally, I have 2 little boys. I've worked throughout this pandemic. My children are at hub school. No matter how much they've begged me not to go, they want to be home with their mum, like the rest of their school friends. I've not questioned it because this is my job. My job is to keep other people safe. And that doesn't matter whether I'm potentially putting myself at risk. But this is why I'm fighting, because if I'm fired and rehired, they'll be asking me to spend potentially an extra 7 hours per week away from my children. I can't do that. I already give everything that I can give. They've been through enough this year. It's time I put them first. And that's why I stand and that's why I fight. Fighting for fairness.
Kelly, that's absolutely amazing. And it's your story, and it's the story of all of our members. That is so powerful. And you're right, you went above and beyond for this company, because at the height of COVID during lockdown, it was workers like yourself who actually put yourselves at risk to go into the homes of people you knew had COVID in order to keep them safe. Imagine if any other key worker was being rewarded for making that sacrifice the way that British Gas is trying to do that. And we fundamentally know and believe that if this company is to be successful, they need to tap into the creativity and the dedication and the loyalty that they get from you and from so many of our members who, I would put against any other engineer out there. We know that we've got the best workforce, and it's British Gas should know it too. Thank you so much, Kelly. That was amazing. And we stand with you. I know that there's many of you tuning in tonight from all over the UK, and it can feel lonely sometimes when you're taking a stand and you're taking strike action in a pandemic when you're a remote worker. But you're not alone on that picket line. There are thousands of people standing with you. I'm going to introduce Owen Jones now, who can tell us a little bit more about message of solidarity and how this is actually looking from the outside to other people who are watching. And there's so many people watching this dispute, aren't there, Owen?
Absolutely. And I think this is so important, not just for the workers who are out on strike. You're not just striking for yourselves. This is a struggle for other workers. The fact that during a pandemic in which ministers and bosses applauded from their windows, do you remember that? Every Thursday, applauding, cheering, banging pots and pans on balconies, on porches, from windows. And then the audacity with key workers who've been going into homes during a pandemic, risking their health of their families, to then attack their terms and conditions during that pandemic is beyond a disgrace. It's beyond a disgrace, and it exposes a terrible hypocrisy in this country of doing one thing because it's the easy thing to do. Everyone has to applaud and clap and cheer because you've got to be seen to be doing the right thing when that's the easiest thing you could have done. When you could put your money where your mouth is and not turn on your own workforce during a deadly pandemic, when people's lives are difficult and hard enough as it is, when people are already stressed about their families and stressed about their communities. What this is about is an assault on hard-won rights and freedoms and security that our ancestors fought for at huge cost and huge sacrifice. During a pandemic like this, workers should be being rewarded and supported. The fact that they're British Gas workers who are being attacked by executives who are being paid exorbitant salaries, having, as I've said, risked their health, ensuring that profits are made for that company and its executives, is disgraceful. And those terms and conditions need to be fought for. That you should have the right to family life. You should have the right to be with your families. These are not luxuries. They're not special add-ons. They're very basic things that everyone should take for granted. And why I say it's not just about you, because if bosses think they can get away with this in British Gas, then other bosses will think, oh, why don't we do the same thing and attack our workers? Why don't we attack their terms and conditions as well? And if you stand and fight and show other workers that you don't have to take it lying back, that you don't have to be on your knees and just take it, grit your teeth as you're attacked by your bosses, then they as well will think we should do this as well. That's how we fight for our rights and freedoms in this country and other countries as well, by encouraging others, by showing leadership. That's what you're doing. You're showing not just courage, you're showing leadership. This is what leadership is. Leadership is doing things which are hard and difficult. And there's nothing, almost, very few things in life that are more difficult than going out on strike. And that's what leadership is about. It's about making tough decisions to show that you're doing it in order to do the right thing, not just yelling at TV sets, being angry about the world, but actually going out there and fighting. And, I should say I've worked in the media now for the best part of a decade. And the fact that the media isn't giving proper coverage, any coverage, to the biggest strike of the pandemic with, as I've said, people who are applauded and clapped, including by journalists, as key workers, the fact that coverage, it just shows how broken our media is. The fact that most of our newspapers are run by themselves bosses with a history of clamping down on trade unions has something to do with it. But nonetheless, in a democracy, given trade unions are the biggest democratic movement in the country, representing millions of workers, the backbone of this nation, you'd think that the media would do their job, the basic task of giving some proper, decent coverage to show what workers in this pandemic are up against, and to show just to show the reality. They're not going to back workers out on strike, but just to show what workers are up against, the facts, the reality of what people are up against. Now, I just want to finish by saying this. This is tough. I remember my dad going on strike. My dad was a Unison senior shop steward, and I remember him going on strike. My mum has also been on strike, another shop steward, many a time growing up. And I've been on many a strike picket over my life, and I've seen the grit and determination of countless workers, many of whom won, by the way. I think of cleaners at LSE who were outsourced, and these were they were overwhelmingly women, many of them migrant workers, and their bosses thought they could just do them in. Who was going to stand up for those workers? Who was going to, they could treat them as they want. People with no voice in society, they thought, so they could do what they want, and they lost. The LSE workers won. Their terms and conditions, they won their battle and their fight. And that's just one example. And I think when bosses like this fight their own workers, they just take it for granted they'll win. And it's just not true. Lots of workers have won these sorts of struggles and these sorts of fights. And in the coming months, when hopefully mass vaccination allows some sort of normality to come back, the danger is a government which locked down too late and didn't have a proper functioning test and trace system, which means the pandemic gets out of control. We have a worse economic crisis. They're going to turn around and start attacking workers again to make them pick up the pieces for the way they cocked up their treatment of the pandemic. And if GMB workers, if British Gas workers show that workers won't take it lying back, then other workers in the coming months will do the same thing. This is how we won our rights and freedoms. It's how we won the welfare state. It's how we won the National Health Service. It's how women won the vote. It's how LGBTQ people won their rights. Every group in society who has their rights did not win them because of the goodwill and generosity of powerful people at the top. He thought, I'm feeling generous. I'll give women the vote for a laugh. People had to fight. They had to struggle. They had to make sacrifices. And we look back at those people as heroes, rightly so. And in just that same tradition, that's what you're fighting in as well. Brave, courageous heroes, and history will damn the bosses who took you on like this, and they will praise those who stood up for their rights. So keep fighting, keep showing courage, keep showing leadership, that's what you're doing, and show that there is an alternative and that other workers will take your example and fight back as well. Solidarity and victory to the British Gas workers.
Owen, thank you so much. I'm sure that people up and down the country are applauding that. You've been really inspiring, and our members really, really appreciate it. And you're right, like their struggle is a struggle that is going to be seen in the time frame of history, and it will have ramifications, and it will change. It will change the law, and whether or not we change it in time for this dispute is not the point. The point is that this union is 130 years old. We've survived in the gas industry for 130 years, and if people who entered struggle before had given given up, none of us today listening and watching would have the rights that we have today. We have because they didn't give up. And people, our children and their children in the future, they will have rights because we are not going to give up on this either. I'm going to introduce a video now from Ed Miliband. He is the Shadow Minister for Business.
I want to thank British Gas workers for what they've done to keep our country going during this pandemic. You're the key workers, the backbone of our country. You've helped families all over the United Kingdom. That's why it's so wrong what British Gas is doing. These tactics of fire and rehire, forcing you to reapply for your old jobs on worse terms and conditions. It would be unacceptable at any time, and it runs totally against the spirit that has kept our country going during this pandemic. Coming together, working together, unions, business, workers. That's the spirit that will get us through to the other side of this crisis. So my message to British Gas is simple. Withdraw this threat. It's wrong, it's unacceptable, and it should not stand.
Thank you. That was brilliant, and that's someone we hope will be a minister in the future and change it. But he's right, and all the speakers are right. You know, the way this company is treating you is in juxtaposition to how well you're being treated and how much integrity you've had in this fight. Because we do want this company to survive, and the company has a choice now. I'm going to introduce my regional secretary, Gary Smith, the secretary for GMB in Scotland, who's going to give an update on how things are going with ACAS. Gary.
Thank you very much, Hazel. And can I begin by just, as ever, saluting each and every one of you who's been taking part in the strike action, saluting your work and saluting your fantastic solidarity. In terms of my role, I was asked by Justin really to be an extra pair of hands as we try to move through this process. And I do want to say to you, as coming into this relatively late, that Adi Baker, the organiser for Wales and South West, Justin is a national official, and Hazel, I mean, I've just done some terrific work in terms of trying to provide you with support and trying to move this dispute forward. And behind the scenes, there is an army of people in the GMB, our communications people, our press people, our politics people, every one of whom, I promise you, is straining every sinew in order that we can try and get a successful outcome from this dispute. You will remember, or you will know, that the company and union were invited by the Arbitration and Conciliation Service, ACAS, into talks. And Justin and me are charged with really fronting those discussions. There is a team of shop stewards, of your shop stewards, who are backing us up as we move through the ACAS process. And I have to say they've showed enormous patience as we've been squirreled away in talks with ACAS and in the last couple of days with the company. Having ACAS involved is important. It makes the talks different. It gives people confidence. It holds everybody to what we say. You know, there's somebody there holding the ring. There's somebody there overseeing the process. And ACAS's involvement also allows us to create the space where we can have some pretty hard and sharp discussions. And at times it's been, the discussions, the very limited discussions we've had the company have been pretty frank, both ways it has to be said. So Justin and me have been charged really with doing the shuttling back and forward, talking to the company, talking with ACAS, and it's a long and torturous process. It really is. And I think the team of we're very well paid as trade union officials. That's not about asking for people's sympathy, but I just want to assure you that every minute and every hour, and we are doing, is being put into this by us, and we are doing absolutely everything to try and move this forward. Now, we'd hope to have something more to say this evening, but I think myself and Justin broke off from ACAS sometime approaching 5:30 this evening. And we have now received a note from ACAS this evening, both ourselves and the company. And I've not had an opportunity to read that, and neither will Justin. He won't have looked at this either. But what ACAS and what we've sought to do with the company is hammer out a formal words which will allow us to move forward. And the formal words is designed to get us into a process of talks that mean that in a very meaningful and substantive way, we can try to address the problems with the company's proposals and to address the aspirations that our members have got. And I do want to emphasise, and I think this is really important, these are company proposals. They're the creators of this situation. Our job is just about trying to get to a position where we can get an outcome that is palatable for you as our members. So ACAS tonight have invited GMB, our union, and the company to consider a form of words that will allow us to move forward into substantive talks. Our plan tomorrow is that we will share those words with the ACAS group, the group of shop stewards who've been backing Justin and me up at ACAS. We will also share those formal words with your senior shop stewards, and we will start to consider those words. I think it's also going to be important that we engage some of the strike leaders and give people early visibility of the words that we've been working on. If we think there is any merit in the agreement and the formal words that's been proposed by ACAS, we will then come to you as members quickly, probably tomorrow, to consult with you on how you best want to move forward. And in short, we are hoping to call a town hall meeting at some point tomorrow, allow you to consider the words that have been drafted through ACAS, and we will ask you, I think, to vote on how we can move or whether we should move forward with an agreed form of words underpinning those talks. So this is complicated, it's torturous, and believe me, you need incredible patience to try and see this through. But so we are clear, we are trying to get an agreement that will allow us to move into substantive talks and negotiations with the company. I need to just set expectations, and that is not that somehow we're going to be renegotiating the whole deal. We are going to be talking around some of the key issues that we think are pressure points for you, the members, and our thoughts and our views are based on all the feedback that we get from you as members. So I hope that's clear. We're going to work this through tomorrow, and I hope that we will be in a position tomorrow afternoon to ask you to vote on a form of words which will allow us to move into more substantive talks. I'm sorry for going into this detail, but I think it's important, and I hope we'll be able to say a lot more tomorrow. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your understanding, for your magnificent solidarity. And wherever this goes, I give you this absolute pledge that everyone in GMB, absolutely everyone who's the privilege to work for this union, will do absolutely everything in our power to try and move this forward and to get a negotiated settlement and an agreement that our members will find acceptable. Thank you, Hazel.
Thanks, Gary. That's quite a big announcement, and I'm sure that we'll get more information sent out to people as soon as possible. I know there's lots of people that are tuning in who are not GMB members, and what I will say is that one way that, if we've had a lot of people asking, you can support our members, is to donate to the strike fund. So we're going to put the link in now. There it is, as if by magic. So if you're watching and you're asking how you can support this strike, then please do that. We've got lots of our members who've taken a really brave and hard decision to go out on strike. We are going to do as a collective, and I mean the membership, not the officials like myself, then that is something that we need to do based on what is the right thing to do, and not because we're going to be starved back into work. That won't happen. You know, it was said at the select committee today that the use of the Section 188 by British Gas was unnecessary, but that is not the biggest mistake that British Gas have made. The biggest mistake that they made was that they saw the workforce as the problem instead of the solution. And we've never said that no change was what we were standing for. There does need to be change, and everyone accepts that, but it has to be change that is made with the workforce and not at the workforce. And that is the difference between making a stand and getting done to, which was the original plan. So if there's been movement, then that is something that we need to look into, but it's because of the work that you guys have all done. You are making a difference. They've said right up until now there will be no movement, and if there is, then that is a sign that you are winning, and that is, you know, absolutely inspiring, and hopefully we can get more out to everybody for tomorrow. For tonight, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone. Make sure that you're continuing to hold the line in British Gas, and make sure you're continuing to support these incredible workers. And if they can, and we can win our fight in this, then it will inspire other workers to win their fight too, because this is a pivotal moment, and it was a moment that everyone will remember in history. You know, as I said, generations will come afterwards and they will look at how we acted in this moment in time, and that we didn't just lie down, that we took a good, righteous stand. And that is what you have done. Continue with that stand, and we will talk to you again tomorrow. Thank you all so much. Good